Diplomat's Corner. Diplomat's Corner. 105.3 Afro FM, your infotainment station.
Welcome to today's Diplomat's Corner edition on 105.3 Afro FM, your infotainment station. I'm Neil Brown, the producer and presenter. The Ethiopian Ministry of Foreign Affairs is a leading diplomatic institution in Africa with the ability and capacity to marshal strategic partners for the continent and the region. It aims to play a central role in Ethiopia's growth into a democratic developmental state and in the achievement of peace and stability in the Horn of Africa. Spokesperson of the ministry, ምልልስ joined us here in the studio to address various national issues, including Ethiopia's diplomatic relations with other countries and other current issues. Stay tuned. Thank you very much, ምልልስ for joining us today for our Diplomat's Corner edition here at Afro FM.
My pleasure.
Let's get right to it. Why don't you start by telling us about Ethiopia's overall diplomatic relations with the different countries? How is it characterized?
Thank you. Let's put it in perspective. Ethiopia 26 years ago was an isolated country engulfed in its own domestic crisis. You have a civil war and the country was in the brink of falling apart. The first few years after the assumed power, the transitional government of Ethiopia was busy and engaged in making sure that the country will continue as a viable state. So the national foreign policy and national security policy and strategy of the government of Ethiopia was issued in 2002. That was a time in which the country, even though we have traditional ties with quite a good number of countries from across the world, Ethiopia started to stride on a foreign policy track based on a refined foreign policy and national security strategy. Since then, we have gone a long journey. As you know, Ethiopia is a country which is an active player in international forums. Our diplomatic ties with countries with our neighbors is very strong. You know, the foreign policy and national security strategy of the government of Ethiopia gives due emphasis and attention to our neighbors, because you can choose your friend, but you cannot choose your neighbor. So anything that affects the neighboring countries, Somalia, Sudan, Djibouti, you name it, will adversely affect our country, Ethiopia. So the government, cognizant of the importance of our neighbors in our effort for peace, democracy, and development, we've been really doing our level best. Now we have a very strong diplomatic ties with our neighbors, and we have frequent mechanisms of addressing our bilateral issues, be it social, political, and economical. Next to our neighbors, the Middle East is our immediate priority. We have very long-standing relations with countries in the Middle East. We have common cultures, values, heritage. So the government was adamant about improving our traditional ties with the Middle East countries. By now, we have diplomatic representations in many of these countries. Business and trade between Ethiopia and countries in the Middle East is increasing exponentially. We have quite a good number of investors from aforementioned regions. Development assistance from countries in the Middle East, be it from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, among others, is very huge. So it's improving. In the same vein, we have a very strong ties with countries in Asia, Europe, and North America. So all in all, we can say that Ethiopia has extricated itself from isolations and it's playing its rightful role in international arenas, and our foreign policy and diplomatic ties with many countries in the world is colorblind. We have diplomatic ties with East or West, if you take into account the Cold War dichotomy that many of us used to call. We have a strong ties with African countries. As a seat of the African Union, as a very big troop contributor country in the world, we have a very strong relationship with our African brothers and sisters. So what we can say is Ethiopia is now a power to reckon with. We are really contributing in the development endeavors of even our neighbors. From the little we have, we share. Development in Ethiopia is development in our neighbors as well. Peacekeeping is one of the issues that Ethiopia is known for. So Ethiopia is always at the forefront in addressing the security challenges of our neighbors, from Somalia to Sudan and other African countries like Liberia and Burundi and Rwanda. So as far as the foreign policy and diplomatic relations between Ethiopia and the world is concerned, Ethiopia is a strategic partner in this part of Africa.
Okay. So, as you know, Ethiopia is hosting several conferences, international conferences. How would you say this actually boosts the diplomatic ties with several countries?
Well, it's true. I mean, Ethiopia is the political and diplomatic capital of Africa. Being the hub of diplomacy of the continent and the region at large will really help in creating opportunities for our country to engage with quite a good number of countries. Many of head of states of the continent have a chance to drop in, like in Addis Ababa, once or twice a year, so they can see for themselves the dramatic changes that Ethiopia is registering. Many of them are highly interested to learn from the best experience that Ethiopia has. In this regard, we have signed a strategic partnership with many African countries from north, south, east, west.
Let's talk about the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam.
Good.
Recently, as you know, you said it yourself earlier that neighbors should actually be able to coexist peacefully, but recently there is a tension that has flared up between Ethiopia and Egypt over the construction of the dam. What can you tell me about that? How is it going to be addressed?
Well, I beg to differ with your conclusion that there is a tension between Ethiopia and other riparian countries such as Sudan and our brothers Egyptians. What is really on the ground is we have very minor differences as far as the issues of the GERD is concerned. This is quite common among two different countries with their own sovereignty, and the way forward is to sit down and resolve differences amicably. As far as Ethiopia is concerned, we firmly believe that the issue of not only GERD, the issue of the Nile should be resolved through a win-win diplomacy. Even if Ethiopia and other riparian countries like Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, you name it, prevail over other low riparian countries, it's not a solution. By the same token, even if the low riparian countries like Sudan and Egypt prevail over other riparian countries, it's not a solution. The only way out, as far as the interest of the riparian countries on Nile is concerned, is a win-win diplomacy. So the government of Ethiopia left no stone unturned to make sure our brothers from Sudan and Egypt are on board as far as GERD is concerned. For example, Ethiopia was the first country to make sure that there is a tripartite technical TNC, the Tripartite National Committee. Ethiopia was the first country to make sure that there are international experts to study into the matter. We firmly believe that this project is not only an Ethiopian project. It is a Pan-African project. It's also a project of the African continent. In our opinion, we firmly believe that the GERD will serve as a bridge between Ethiopia, the Sudan, and Egypt. As the late Prime Minister Meles Zenawi said, the relations between Ethiopia and Egypt is like an old marriage. With all its ups and downs, it will continue to survive. We have common destinies, but we want to see that there is change of mind as far as the Nile water use in Cairo. Ethiopia is adamant that we don't adhering to an agreement which we have never signed. Ethiopia firmly believes that it has all legitimate right to use its natural resources. For Ethiopia, this issue of GERD is a question of survival. When we meant by a question of survival, as a country which has been affected by successive famine in the past 20 years, as a country in which ensuring that our youth, a very bulging number of youth, has access to job opportunity, we should make sure that we have been able to use our natural resources properly. But it doesn't mean that we have a very strong attitude towards our brothers in the region. So even for Ethiopia, the management of our resources is a question of survival. When we say underdevelopment and poverty, it's not like the underdevelopment and poverty that you can see in some parts of the world, like Europe. We only see that people are living under poverty. It's not like the way poverty is commonly visible in North America and Europe. But for us, as a nation to continue, for us, as a viable nation to continue, we would like to use our resources to change the livelihood of our bulging populations.
Like you said, the issue of GERD is a question of survival, and Egyptians, the Nile water is a question of survival for them also. How do you think that certain disagreements that arise during this project could be addressed?
You know, as I said, we should continue to sit down and discuss. By the way, we should be appreciative of the progress that we have made so far. 15, 20 years ago, it was a luxury for us to see eyeball to eyeball and discuss on that. Now at least we sit down and we negotiate. We agree sometimes to disagree. So the only way out is a win-win solution. What we meant by a win-win solution is we should continue to engage and resolve our differences amicably. As far as the government of Ethiopia is concerned, we'll continue to engage with the government of Sudan and with the government of Egypt in the best interest of our people who have been living together for millennia.
My next question is actually connected to the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam and Qatar's involvement.
Good.
There are some reports that Qatar is going to be financing the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, and Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegne's recent visit was actually to facilitate that. What can you say about that? Is there any clarification you can give?
It's a $1 million question, but it's a bluff. The purpose of the visit by His Excellency Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegn to the state of Qatar has nothing to do with the construction of the Great Renaissance Dam. The Great Renaissance Dam is a flagship project of Ethiopians by Ethiopians. Ethiopians of all walks of life have raised financially to contribute to the completion of this project. Ethiopians of all walks of life, at home and abroad, have contributed through their knowledge to make sure that this dam, which has been and is the dream of generations, is realized. Otherwise, Qatar is a very strong partner in the Middle East. We have a very strong trade and investment ties. The ultimate purpose of the visit by His Excellency Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegn is to further deepen these traditional ties.
Qatar and Ethiopia had severed their diplomatic ties during the late Prime Minister Melles Zenawi's time, when he cut all diplomatic ties with the state of Qatar because of certain disagreements. How is that being improved now, and how is that going to show for the future
diplomatic ties of the two countries.
This brings us to the end of today's Diplomats Corner program, but don't forget to join us same time next week to listen to the second and final part of the interview with Foreign Affairs Ministry spokesperson Mellis Alam. I'm Neo Brown. Have a productive week.
Diplomats Corner. Diplomats Corner. 105.3 Afro FM, your infotainment station.